Hello, everybody. I have a very special guest with me today. Joining me is David Berardi, but he is Italian, and so he's going to pronounce his name in the proper way. I'm pronouncing it in the butchered American way. But if he were here in the States, we'd call him David Berardi. And David actually has been a student of mine for basically about a year, and that's it. He signed up with the master course back in, I believe February of last year. We had one email back and forth with each other. I just said, welcome to the course. I'll let you signed up. He wrote back and said, cool, man, I'm ready to go. I'm excited. And then I didn't hear from him actually for an entire year. And he actually in 1 year, almost to the date, emailed me just last week and had some really great news that he's actually signed with a library and he's got some tracks out with them and he's actually making moves. And so this is really encouraging for me as an educator, as somebody trying to inspire you guys to get into this industry and really succeed. But I think David's story can really inspire those of you that are also in your first couple of years, maybe your first year in this business, because trust me, I get emails all over the range. I get emails like these ones from David saying like, hey, it's working for me. I'm getting into libraries. I also get those emails that are like, hey, not getting accepted, not feeling motivated. I don't really know. It's not really working for me. So I get ranges all over the place. But when I get emails like this, where I'm seeing some success and people knocking down doors and getting into libraries, I want to kind of dig in and find out, what did you do to get to that place? What kind of habits are you putting into place? Like what's the basically secret formula, if there is one, for getting successful in this industry? And obviously David is seeing some path of least resistances here. He's getting into these companies. So David, thank you so much for joining us today, man.
You got it. Yeah, it's pretty fantastic to have a contract. It feels really great, because you work so hard every day. You're there, like you're cranking out tracks, and to see actual like positive feedback was really good. But a little bit of background about me. I've been working in the industry, not in the licensing industry, but in the audio industry since 1999. I was actually live monitor engineer. That was my job. So I was mixing monitors for bands on stage, and I was back in Italy. Then I started transitioning into studio work, and slowly, I would like produce bands and engineer bands and do all of that. In 2006, I moved to the United States, and I went to a school called Full Sail in Florida, and I took the recording arts course there for about a year. Then I moved to New York City in 2007, which is where I am right now. And I started working as an audio post-production person. So I would do Foley, sound design in a studio. And I did that for about 4 to 5 years. And the cool thing about working in a studio is that usually at night and weekends, they let you use the studio to do whatever it is that you want to do with it. Like if you want to produce bands, or if you want to like mix movies, and I did all of that. I had some limited success producing bands, like, one band that I work with got fairly famous in Russia. We licensed a few songs of theirs on MTV on a show there. So it was, I had some limited success. It was when I took the master course last year that what happened is, the way the course is structured, it really helps you go through all the steps that you have to go through to eventually get a contract. Now, the course is not going to do that for you, right? And you have to put 99% of the work. The course is just basically going to say, hey, so week 1, this is what we're going to do. Week 2, this is what we're going to do. And then when Jesse says, okay, you know what, next week we're going to submit, you have to have tracks ready to go. And you have to be realistic with yourself. You have to listen to your tracks and compare your tracks to what's out there right now. I don't have cable TV because I just don't watch TV, but you can go on YouTube and you can play whatever it is that they play right now. I have Netflix. So, and you have to listen to your tracks, and you have to tell yourself, okay, are my tracks as good or better, or at least like 80% on their way to be there? If the answer is yes, then it's almost impossible for you not to get a contract within 6 months, 9 months of trying. It's going to take a long time. Okay. It didn't take me a long time, but I've been doing this forever. So, my tracks were already at the right quality, but actually I wasn't composing the right genre. So I was, quote unquote, very lucky in a way, because what I did is I submitted 3 tracks. One track was a classical, like, I guess orchestral type of track. Another track was more of like a soft rock track, and another track was more of like a synthesizer-y kind of like, I guess texture sounding track. I contacted 6 companies. 4 of those companies did not get back to me. Quite honestly, 3 of those 4 companies that did not get back to me are huge. So one lesson learned is, chances are, if you're starting in the business, trying to contact companies that are like the best of the top notch of whatever, I don't know that they're going to get back to you, because I was looking at some of these companies, and the composers working for these companies are like people who do Hollywood movies. It's very hard to compete with that, not only because they're better composers, but also because the resources they have at their point in their career is something that realistically there's no way that you can have it right now, unless you come from a family of millionaires and you can buy all the equipment. Even then, you have to spend years learning the equipment. So out of 6 companies, 4 companies did not get back to me. One company got back to me and said, Davide, great music, but it's not the genre that our clients are looking for. So, if you have this type of music, they license a lot of like that corporate, like upbeat pop kind of stuff, which is something that I could probably compose, but is not necessarily something that I do. Like, it would take me a few weeks or a couple of months to research it and really become good at that genre. The 6th company actually got back to me, and they said, we really like your tension textural kind of tracks. And I was, okay, that's great. I did my first 10-track submission. I had 120 tracks already.
Mm-hmm.
Now, mind you, of those 120 tracks, 110 were probably no good, right? And you have to be realistic with yourself. You got to listen to your tracks, and you got to go like, okay, I can hear that it's got potential, but it's just not quite there. And I sent to this library that I'm still working with the 10 tracks that I felt were the strongest, and they accepted them. Now, with hindsight, I do think they were giving me a chance, because now when I go back and listen to some of those tracks are licensable, but not quite at the quality they should be. Then I did another 10-track submission, and this time the library owner was like, okay, Davide, out of these 10 tracks, 8 of these, not good. These 2 I really like. Now you have 2 options. You can either give me all of these 10 tracks, I will take them, or you can go back and do 8 more tracks that sound more like these 2 that I like. And the answer is obvious. Obviously, you're going to go and compose things that the library is going to be able to use, because you want to show that, you're actually putting effort into this. This is like it's like a long-term relationship, like working with a library is not a one-night stand, is a marriage, and it just takes a lot. I mean, I'm married. I've been married for 8 years now. By the way, I have 4 kids. So, for everyone out there who feels like I got a family, I got to pay the bills, it's going to be very hard for me to do this. Not true. You got to do it. You have to do it. I just got newborns actually in December, and I am still working with a library, and I actually now I'm about to have 50 tracks with them. Okay.
Wow. And that's after tracks, just 1 year.
Yes, but I kind of stopped working for about 3 months because my wife was very pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very hard for her to do a lot of things. And she doesn't work. So I pay the rent, I pay the gas, electricity, I buy food. So I have to work. My side gig is I'm a sound designer and Foley artist. So I do a lot of freelance work, and I am a sound design professor here at the New York Film Academy in New York City, which I love. I started working as a teacher just to like get some extra money, and I don't want it to be my career, but I love it. It's fantastic.
That's
It's
awesome, man.
great work. And being able to being inspired by like, I mean, students teach me things every day.
Welcome to my life.
Anyways,
Absolutely.
exactly. Yeah. And yeah, so it's 50 tracks in a year. But to be honest with you, since my twins were born, now that my wife is able to take care of all four kids by herself, I do about 10 tracks a month.
It's really good still,
That's
though.
that's
It's really
my
good.
average. And I my job is part time, like doing sound design and Foley and teaching. So I have about, I would say, 30 hours a week to dedicate to the music licensing business. Um, so in about 120 hours a month, I've never done this math, but in 120 hours a month, I do 10 tracks. So I guess it's about what is it, 12 hours per track. And the reason why it takes me so long is because half of the sounds I use, I make.
Mm,
I'm a Contact 5 programmer, so
wow.
I create my own loops. I create my own percussions. I create sounds. Like I literally take days where I go out with my field recorder and I bang on things. I have a bunch of Contact microphones and stuff,
Nice.
and then I bring them back. I edit them in Pro Tools and I put them on the keyboard and I create pads, leads, guitar sounds, synthesizers. And so part of the reason why a lot of my music is unique is because nobody else in the world has these sounds. So one thing that I would say is I know that a lot of composers love using libraries, as in like sound libraries, which is great. You definitely should do it. I do it. You should buy the top-notch libraries that money can buy, but you need to definitely give at least a 20 or 30% of your track something unique. It doesn't necessarily have to be a sound that you make like what I do, but get into synthesizer programming. Whatever synthesizer you use, if it's Serum, Omnisphere, Absinthe, Massive. And if you don't know these synthesizers I just talked about, go and research them right now. Those are the products you need to use.
That's a
Um,
huge issue too. I can tell you that that's like on a almost daily basis in the syndicate. We talk about synths and plugins and leads that just sound very templatey. They kind of sound like somebody just grabbed a preset and threw it on there. And so the originality, the uniqueness is just not there. And so it's one of the major issues of why I give a lot of pushback on my opportunities. And it's probably going to be one of the major reasons, if you're watching this video, why you might be getting pushbacks on your submissions to libraries, is if you are just going like, all right, first bass synth I can find, cool, I use that. And that's kind of your process. Every time you add a new instrument or a synth to your track, you will just sound kind of plain and boring. Like your music's just going to sound like a cookie cutter karaoke kind of a song. And you're not going to be able to carve out a little bit of like David was talking about, like a unique niche for yourself, so that your track just, there's something about it. Sometimes people can't put their finger on it, but there's something good about this music. And a lot of it has to do with that, is that there's like interesting new sounds that are very unique. So he's absolutely right. You don't have to become an expert at programming or any of that kind of stuff, but getting, like you said, that 20-30% of that knowledge so that you can tweak. You can start with a preset and then tweak it, or maybe you stack up a couple of different instruments on top of each other. You can side chain instruments into each other. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to achieve some really unique sounds, but get experimental with things and don't just go with the very first sound that you get plugged into. Now, I do want to ask one more thing, and this is a huge, huge problem with producers, musicians, and the music business just in general. You kind of, you mentioned it really quickly, and then we moved on, and you said that you had evaluated 120 of your songs, and like 110 of them you said just weren't there, and you just admitted that, like, yeah, those weren't really there. I can do better than that. Now, that is no small thing to accept, right? That's almost like looking at your children going, that one's ugly, that one's not smart. I mean, that's a really, really hard thing to do, right? It's almost impossible for a lot of producers and musicians to be able to look at their own creations and go, yeah, not good enough. Nah, it could be better. Some of us do have that ability. Some of us obviously get that ability after years and years, and you've been in it for a long time, getting rejections and being told, no, not quite, do it again, do it again. I want to ask you though, was it maybe some of your sound work, your kind of the day jobs that you've had that have given you some of that? Maybe you've gotten a lot of submissions from bands you worked with and you've been able to give them constructive feedback. And so you also can now turn that around on yourself to say, all right, if I were somebody else, what would I really think about my music? Where do you think that skill and ability came from for you to really be honest with yourself to go, I need help, I need work, I need to do that again?
Well, first of all, well, two things. Number one is the older you get, and not necessarily because of age, but because time passes by, the more your ear gets refined, you know? For example, right now I'm taking a drawing class, not because I want to be an artist, but because me and my wife, we just love to learn new things. And the more I draw and the more I try to draw things in real life, the more I can analyze what makes things look beautiful. And, you know, you do this for a long time and slowly your ear gets used to like, oh, wow, I hear that percussion. It's got a lot of like low end in it. It doesn't sound muddy, but then it has that tick. And it's probably, I mean, I have a past as an engineer, so I can tell like, oh, that's a little 4K or 5K. So that's the number one thing. Your ear just gets better. Number two, personally for me, I am a film composer. That's my ultimate goal. I want to make music for films and actually video games even more so.
Okay.
Video games, it's kind of tough because you don't get royalties, but you get a lot of money up front. And if you get to score a AAA game, it's a six-figure lump sum. But being a film composer, I scored a lot of films. I scored a lot of commercials. I scored a lot of these things. And a lot of times people who hired me to do this, I would make music, right? And I would feel like, oh man, that's the best thing ever. And they would get back to me with comments like, oh, you know what? This sound here is not really working with what the character is doing. And so I'm slowly going like, oh, I see what you're saying. So this is the emotion going through right now. And that sound is not quite getting there. And then, so you slowly get better at turning emotion words into musical words, which is different for every genre. You know, if you want to make something feel somber, you can do it in hip hop, you can do it in EDM, you can do it in orchestral. You have to translate it. What does that mean for the instrument and the scale and the type of the way that you play it? But for me personally, the third thing, which I know I said it was two, but then I thought about another one, reference tracks. Reference tracks, reference tracks. You play the stuff that is hot right now, that it is on TV right now. You listen to it and you listen to your stuff. And if your stuff doesn't sound at least 70 or 80% there, you got to do something about it. And a lot of it, 80% about your music is not about which notes you play, but it's the music production aspect of things. When I compose, like right now, I'm making a bunch of like tension tracks, right? So these are like, you know, big percussion, modulated synths, and, you know, like lots of percussive, lots of rhythm, right? And what makes these tracks great is the fact that the library gave me reference tracks of the tracks that they placed. So they were like, okay, you know what? Last year we placed this track, this track, this track, and this track. So chances are, if you make something unique, new, and fresh, however, that has somewhat of the emotion and the sonic, I guess, palette that this track has, chances are you might be able to get a placement. I mean, personally, also what I do, on the technical side of things, you got to get a fantastic reverb. I use Altiverb. It's a $5,000. It's the best $500 you'll ever spend. I have a real outboard compressor. I use an API 2500. It's about $3,000. I know it's a lot. It just, I built this slowly, like since 1999, it's almost 20 years. I bought things like every 6 months. So that in a nutshell, that's what allows you to understand, okay, is my track sounding as good as the tracks out there? It's not such a simple concept. It takes time. And what happens is, like I teach sound design, right? And I teach audio recording on set. And I teach how to actually use music to convey emotion in a film. A lot of times students, one of the hardest things for them to do is they ask me, Davide, how do I know where to put music, how to start the music and when to end the music? How do I make that decision? Because sometimes students, they'll start a music piece in a point of the movie where that music is not quite doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, day one, they do that. 3 months later, they get a little better. 6 months later, they get a little better. It's a lengthy process. By the way, I'm about to have about 50 tracks with this library. I got 0 placements. Okay. This is normal. It's just going to take a long time. I'm going to have about 100 tracks this summer. If I get placements this summer or this fall, I will get paid probably next year. So even though I started working with this library like 6-9 months ago, I might not see any money for like a year and a half, 2 years. Okay. It's normal. I remember when I worked with that band, we produced those tracks. It took us, to get the royalties from Russia, forget about it. It took us 3 years. From the time of placement to the time we got money, it literally was 3 years. Okay. It just, you got to be patient. If you put 10, 20 tracks out there and 3 months later, you're like, oh man, I didn't get any placement. I'm just going to go and do something different. It's not going to work. I know you said it took you about 2.5 years to really start making a real income. Now, it really depends also on the type of music you make. There's some music that is going to take longer to get placed. For example, my music, I did hip hop orchestral in November because that's what they needed. And then I said, okay, I'm ready for my next batch. What do you need? And they were like, oh, you can do more hip hop orchestral, but I really need orchestral rock sports sounding stuff. How many can you make? And my answer was, I will give you 10 tracks in a month. Now, 10 tracks in a month is kind of a tall order, but what I do, and this is my technique, and it might not work for everybody. I say things and I put them in writing, and I don't put them in writing just for myself. I know some people do that. They write things for themselves. You have to write it and you have to send it to somebody. So now you made a commitment and you have to do it. And if you don't do it, then you suck. Well, no, you don't suck, but you know what I mean. So that's what I did. Like, for example, I did these tracks and I finished all of them by December 27th. I submitted everything with metadata and everything. December 28th, I sent an email. I'm like, okay, I'm ready for my next batch. I didn't wait like a month. Immediately, right away. And they were like, okay, so these are the tracks that we need. And they sent us, they sent me, but I'm assuming they're doing it with all of their composers and producers, reference tracks. And there were like a few genres that they got a lot of placement with. I was like, okay. And then I was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna do 10 tracks in a month, and by the end of by the end of January, I'm gonna submit these tracks. Now we have a group on Facebook for everybody who composes for this library, and the owner posted something, and the owner said, okay, you know what? We need these instrumentals, and she gave about 7 different genres, and there was a different deadline, right? And I was like, oh, I sent her an email and I said, hey, I have 12 tracks for you. I didn't do 10. I actually did 12, right? I have 12 tracks for you, but it looks like you have this deadline. So why don't I just make 20 and just submit later? And the answer was, sounds like a plan. I was like, all right, well, there you go. I think another piece of advice that we can give, keep the conversation with the library owner quick, fast, and to the point. Okay. I know that sometimes we like to share our feelings and we like to share like our personal life and all of that. And everybody does that, right?
Yeah.
Don't do that. Okay. This is a professional relationship. Now, some of these people might become your friends. Okay. And they might come over for dinner, but chances are they won't. So that would be another piece of advice. It's what I do, and it worked for me. Also, if you take the master course, what really works with it, which has everything to do with what I just talked about, is you have to do things like you have to create a structure, which Jesse created for you in the master course, but you have to create a structure and you have to follow it. Now, I am a pretty insanely self-starting, heavily driven kind of person.
That's very apparent.
But I know that, and which sometimes I actually have to, I actually have to force myself to take breaks, because I won't, because I'll start making music and I'll just continue,
right.
And it'll be like 3:00. My wife comes upstairs and she's like, have you had lunch? I'm like, you know what? I should probably have lunch right now. And then the moment I go downstairs, it's like, man, I'm starving and I feel like crap. But, because I have this, I guess you could call it a problem, but in this industry, it's actually really good. Then I just continue making things. Today, I'm starting a new track. I don't use templates for this particular genre. Like when I did the orchestral rock and the orchestral hip hop, I did create a template. It took me about 4 days to create a template, because what I do is I create templates that are like really huge with like 200 different tracks. And what I do is I open the template, I make my first song, and then I copy the template over and I delete all the tracks I already used.
That's smart.
So I'm not going to use the same sounds.
Right.
Now, of course, if you have orchestral samples, chances are you're going to have to reuse those. Like, for example, when I did those orchestral rock tracks, my staccato trumpets and my staccato French horns were constantly working, right? Because you're making all those tracks that go on NBC or whatever for like football and baseball. I'm not a sports guy. Mm-hmm. So I actually had to research that genre. But then I realized, oh, this is just rock and roll with horns in it. So, and I'm an electric guitar player. That's my main instrument. But I also play the keyboard and the continuum, which it's right here. I'm not going to show it to you guys. You could probably research it. It's a keyboard that is not a keyboard. So it's
keys.
No, like it's like basically a piece of cloth, and you go through it and you can play any pitch you want. It helps me. I make a lot of like risers. Yeah. So I'll go like those things, or like if I want to do some like crazy like things like that, they're more organic. Like when you program these things, sometimes they come out really perfectly perfect, which works if you're doing EDM or like future bass, then you want it to be that way. But if you are looking to put, like you're talking about hybrid tracks, and that's all I do. You know, if you're looking to put, like, say, synthesized elements in a rock track, you have to make sure that the element fits in the genre so it doesn't sound completely foreign, you know? And using an organic instrument really works. So yeah, that's a lot of
Yeah, it's a
information.
lot. And I just want to say this, man. So, I get emails, I get comments on my YouTube channel, and people are like, "Hey, man, I'm having a hard time, and how do I get motivated, and how do I do this? I don't know." It's like Davide right here, 4 kids, basically kind of like a full/part-time job. Also, he's doing 10 tracks a month, and a wife, and a house to take care of. He's taking drawing lessons. What's your excuse? You know what I'm saying? Like you would be the first person that would have a dozen excuses right there why you can't do this, right? You got kids, you got this, you got bills to pay, you got this. And we, even with all of those things that you could be choosing, again, you selected success. And that's why I've made this case over and over again. You can really only choose one of these things. You can have excuses why you're not succeeding. You can have all these excuses for why you're not cranking out 10 tracks a month, why you're not submitting the libraries, why you're not taking the time to improve your tracks, to, update your samples or whatever. Or you can just say, to hell with all those excuses. I'm just going to succeed, right? If I got to go, like Davide figured out, if I got to go redo these 8 tracks, all right, I want to get placements. I don't want them to take tracks that are just and so it just sits on their catalog shelf and not getting any placements. I obviously want to work for the right reasons by getting myself the most amount of royalties down the road. So he's just chosen success, and he's also chosen a long-term path. That's the other thing here, is that working at any job for 2 years without a paycheck is a tall order. It's a very tall order for people to go spend something. The only reason why it works, it's worked for me and it's working for Davide here, is because we love making music. I mean, if he didn't love, like he said, he's addicted. He's in his, same with me. We are hopeless addicts to music. And so we're just cranking out music all the time. And if you're watching this video, you are too. That's got to be your payday in the beginning, at least, for sure. Like, just making cool music, getting your contract, getting them accepted, seeing your library, your tracks maybe show up on their catalog online, just knowing that potentially you're obviously out there and you could be getting placements right now. That's got to be your paycheck for the first couple of weeks, because you aren't going to be getting a lot of royalties or any royalties. Maybe you'll get some upfront sync fees. Maybe you'll get a custom job here and there that can put a couple of $1,000 in your pocket, but certainly not going to be enough to live on. It's certainly not going to be enough to quit your job and say, all right, I'm on the easy street now. It takes patience. It takes endurance, and it definitely needs to go day after day. And so, as Davide figured out, getting into the master course was one of those things that he needed to just kick himself in the butt, to just say, I need structure. I need to invest in this. I need to make sure that I have a sort of A to Z plan for how to do this. And I'm so glad that it's working out for you, man. That's really encouraging for me. It's really cool to see that. But as he said, I provide about 1% of the work to do this. Okay. And then that 1% is just the, my experience, my knowledge, kind of guiding you through it. Like, maybe watch out for this, watch out for that. Here's how you can kind of stay focused in the long run. But like he said, it's 99% your hustle. I cannot come into your studio, put your fingers on the keyboard, and help you compose your music. We don't have that technology yet. It's coming. Probably in about 10 years, we're going to have matrix style plugs that we can plug into each other. And I'm going to show you what I'm doing so you can learn how to do it. But right now, you're on your own. You got to produce yourself. You got to be honest with where you are, where your music is, so that you can take those necessary steps to get to the next level, to put yourself on a path towards full-time income. And Davide is definitely on his way now, and it's really cool to see that. So Davide, thank you so much for your time today. If you guys want to check out more about him, I've posted his website actually below this video, so you can click on that. If you're a music supervisor looking for a great composer, Davide could definitely help you out there. So definitely check him out. We want to make sure that we're supporting our fellow composers here and getting more work for them as much as possible. So Davide, thank you so much for your time today, man.
All right. I'll see you guys later, and stay motivated and just keep cranking out those tracks.
Awesome, buddy.